He only wanted your gorgeous country cottage. And on a fortune teller's advice, Catherine decided to test her fiancé before the wedding, and she was right to do so. Hello, my dears. Put aside what you're doing for a minute. I want to share a story that will help you look at your loved ones in a new way. Write and tell us where you're watching from. We wish you a pleasant listen. Rusty knew. The old ginger cat had always seen right through people, and now he sat on the kitchen windowsill, staring tensely into the garden as if expecting trouble. His tail twitched nervously, and his green eyes narrowed with suspicion. Catherine poured herself tea into her favorite cup with little roses. An inheritance from her grandmother, just like the entire cozy cottage outside the city, with its carved window frames and antique furniture. What's the matter, my darling? She stroked the cat's neck, feeling his muscles tighten. Probably smelled mice again. But Rusty only purred in displeasure and jumped down to the floor, deliberately turning away from the window. His green eyes held a worry Catherine couldn't yet understand. The cat had lived with her for 8 years, ever since she moved into her grandmother's house after university, and he had never behaved like this before. At 32, she considered herself happy. A design studio and a cozy home brought her a good income. San Francisco residents eagerly ordered interiors in the Provençal style, which Catherine had mastered to perfection. The cottage was immersed in flowers she tended with the same love her grandmother once had: roses along the path, peonies by the porch, lavender beneath the bedroom windows. After an unsuccessful romance with Andrew, who never appreciated the beauty of these places and constantly insisted on moving to the city, she had almost resigned herself to solitude. Almost. The phone rang just as Catherine had settled into her favorite rocking chair with a volume of Chekhov. Rusty heard a familiar voice at the gate 20 minutes later. Marina, as always, appeared without warning. Her best friend since university, the only close person left after her parents' death 3 years ago. Tall, striking, with short hair and always painted lips, she always looked as though she had stepped off the cover of a glossy magazine. She worked at a large bank, wore expensive suits, and drove a red car, which now gleamed in the rays of the setting sun beyond the gate. "I've brought you some news." Marina entered the house, glancing around the familiar setting. The antique sideboard with porcelain, her grandmother's embroidered napkins, the photographs in carved frames. "Remember I told you about a colleague at the bank? Stephen? He works in the corporate clients department." Catherine shook her head, pouring tea from the samovar, another family heirloom. Marina often spoke about her colleagues, but Catherine rarely remembered the names of people she didn't know personally. "Well, he recently got divorced," her friend continued, settling into the chair opposite. "His wife turned out to be a shrew, only drained money from him. A decent man, 35 years old, doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, no children. And the best part, he loves classical literature. Can you imagine? These days it's rare to find a man who reads Turgenev instead of crime novels." Rusty suddenly arched his back and hissed, staring straight at Marina. She winced and leaned back. "Your cat's gone wild. Maybe you should take him to the vet? Otherwise he'll become aggressive soon." "Rusty isn't aggressive," Catherine defended him, calling the cat to her side. "He's just sensitive. Grandma used to say cats can see right through people." "Superstitions," Marina waved her hand. "So, what do you say about Stephen? I could introduce you. Tomorrow I'm going to the bookstore for new releases, come with me. And maybe we'll just happen to meet." "Marina, I'm not ready for any introductions," Catherine sighed, stroking the now calmer Rusty. "I'm fine as it is. Home, work, garden. Why would I need man trouble?" "Oh, come on." Her friend set down her cup and leaned forward. "You can't spend your whole life with just a cat. You're 32, beautiful, smart, with this gorgeous home. Any man would dream of a wife like you. At least take a look at him. If you don't like him, you'll just say so." Marina's conviction made Catherine hesitate. Maybe her friend was right? Maybe it was time to try again? Andrew had been far from the right match, too ambitious, always discontent with country life. And this Stephen, from the description, seemed entirely different. All right, she agreed at last. I'll go with you to the bookstore. But I'm not promising anything. Marina beamed. Perfect. You'll see, you'll like him. He has such intelligent eyes and speaks so well, not like those youngsters. She stayed another hour, talking about work and mutual acquaintances. But Catherine noticed that her friend kept glancing at the clock and pulled out her phone several times, quickly typing messages. Strange. Marina had never been distracted like that during their conversations before. The next day, the bookstore in the city center smelled of fresh paper and coffee from the neighboring cafe. The October sun streamed through the large windows, lighting up the rows of shelves. Catherine leisurely browsed the new fiction releases when a tall man in an expensive navy coat stopped beside her. "Excuse me, could you tell me where the American classics are?" he asked in a pleasant baritone, and Catherine felt her heart race. Turning, she met dark, attentive eyes. A handsome, masculine face, a warm smile, the silver at his temples lending him dignity and refinement. His suit fit perfectly, a luxury watch glinted on his wrist. A true gentleman. The kind seen only in old films. Of course, over there, she gestured toward the far wall. The American classics are arranged alphabetically. Thank you very much. The man inclined his head in an old-fashioned bow. I'm looking for a gift for my mother. Every autumn she rereads Steinbeck. She says only he could capture the American landscape that way. I understand, Catherine brightened, forgetting her shyness. The Grapes of Wrath is something special. Every time I read it, it feels as though I'm walking the California fields myself. The man looked at her with surprise and admiration. You love Steinbeck too? How rare it is to meet someone with good literary taste. Especially among young women. Most just read crime stories and romances these days. I grew up on the classics, Catherine admitted. My grandmother taught me from childhood. We have a whole library at home. Twain, Hemingway, Fitzgerald. Fitzgerald, the man exclaimed. The Great Gatsby is my favorite book. Do you remember how Gatsby looks at the green light? It's a longing for the unattainable, for the dream. The conversation started on its own, as though they had known each other for many years. It turned out that Stephen, that was his name, knew literature no worse than a scholar. He recited whole passages from memory, reflected on the psychological depth of American writers, admired Steinbeck's and Hemingway's descriptions of nature. Catherine listened, holding her breath. When was the last time she had met a man who didn't talk about football and cars, but about eternal things? And where do you live? Stephen asked after they had already been talking for half an hour, moving from shelf to shelf. Outside the city, in a cottage, Catherine replied. It came from my grandmother. It's very beautiful there. A garden, a pond, old oaks. How I envy you. Stephen's voice carried a genuine dreaminess. All my life I've dreamed of a house in the country. To wake up to birdsong instead of the roar of cars. To be able to plant a garden, grow flowers. But for now, it's only dreams. And where do you live now? In the city, renting an apartment, he sighed. After the divorce I had to move out. My wife kept our apartment, and I make do with less. But it's nothing, only temporary difficulties. Catherine felt sympathy for him. How hard it must be at his age to start life over again. And yet he was so intelligent, so well-mannered. Perhaps we could continue our conversation over coffee? Stephen suggested, and his voice carried a timid hope. If you have time, of course. I don't want to impose, but it's so rare to meet a kindred spirit. At the next table in the cafe, Marina smiled, pretending to be absorbed in a magazine. From time to time she raised her eyes and nodded approvingly at Catherine. How perfectly everything had worked out. A real fateful encounter. The coffee at the little cozy cafe by the bookstore turned out to be surprisingly good. Stephen ordered a double espresso, Catherine a cinnamon cappuccino, and they settled at a table by a large window overlooking the autumn park with golden maples and oaks. The first fallen leaves swirled in the air, as if dancing to the music of the wind. "Tell me about your home," Stephen asked, gazing intently at Catherine with his dark eyes. "I can just picture it: an old mansion in American style, a veranda with carved posts, a garden with centuries-old trees. Surely there's a special atmosphere there, the kind only family nests create." Catherine smiled at his romantic imagination, feeling her last wariness melt away. "Not exactly a mansion, of course, but it really is beautiful. My grandparents built it in the 70s. Grandfather was the district's chief agronomist, so he was entitled to a plot. A 2-story red brick house with a tall attic and large windows. And the garden? Yes, the garden is special. Grandfather was a real master. He understood plants, read specialized journals, corresponded with experienced gardeners all over the country." "Interesting. And what grows there?" Stephen leaned forward, as though every word were precious to him. "There are many fruit trees. Apple trees of different varieties: Granny Smith, Red Delicious, Autumn Sweets. Pears, cherries, even peaches. Grandfather managed to acclimate a southern variety. And the flowers. A rose garden with 20 varieties: tea, shrub, climbing. Peonies that are already 30 years old, can you imagine? Every spring they bloom so magnificently that neighbors come to admire them. I take care of the flower beds with annuals myself: petunias, marigolds, nasturtiums." "Sounds like paradise on earth," Stephen said dreamily. And his voice carried such sincere longing that Catherine felt even greater sympathy for him. "Is there water? A pond, or at least a small pool?" "There's a little pond, artificial," Catherine brightened. "Grandfather dug it himself for 3 years in the evenings after work. Lined it with natural stone he hauled from the quarry in his pickup. Mother used to tell how much effort he put into it. He wanted everything to be like in real estates. Now in summer lilies bloom, they're white and pink, and in spring the frogs give such concerts that you can't open the windows." Catherine laughed. "But I'm used to it, it's part of nature." "What happiness! To live in harmony with nature," Stephen sighed. "Only, looking after all that on your own must be hard. Especially in winter. Clearing snow, shoveling paths, tending the fireplace." "Yes, sometimes I get tired," Catherine admitted. "Especially in autumn, when the leaves need to be raked, or in spring pruning, whitewashing the trees, preparing the flower beds. But I grew up in this house, I'm used to it. And hiring workers is expensive, and I don't trust strangers with my garden. Have you ever thought of, well, finding a reliable helper?" Stephen asked carefully, as though testing the waters. "I mean, a life partner. Someone who would share both the cares and the joys with you. A house like that is meant for a large, strong family." Catherine felt a light embarrassment and warmth in her chest at the same time. The conversation was taking too personal a turn for a first meeting, but somehow it didn't irritate her. On the contrary, it pleased her. "Of course I've thought about it," she answered quietly, looking into her cup. "But it's not easy to find someone who would love not only me, but also my way of life. Many modern men prefer city apartments with comforts over country houses with chores. They want entertainment, restaurants, clubs. I don't understand such people." Stephen shook his head sincerely. "The city is hustle, stress, poor ecology, an endless chase after illusory success. But in the country one can truly live, breathe deeply, think of eternal things, read good books. I've always dreamed of my own garden, of growing something with my own hands. Tomatoes, cucumbers, herbs, berries. All my own, without chemicals or additives." "You know gardening?" Catherine was surprised. In her experience, men either had no interest in plants at all or treated them purely for consumption. "I read a lot of specialized literature," Stephen answered modestly. "Gardening magazines, books on organic farming, the classical works of Burbank. My mother spent her whole life in the garden. She taught me a lot while she was alive. I know when to plant which crops, how to fight pests with folk remedies: garlic infusion, wormwood decoction. How to make compost properly so the soil is fertile. How to cover roses for the winter so they don't freeze." Catherine listened to him with growing admiration. Could it be that fate had finally sent her a kindred soul? Stephen was saying exactly what she had always longed to hear from a man. No talk of careers, money, or expensive cars. Only of what truly mattered. And in the house, do you enjoy doing household chores? She asked carefully. Cooking, for example? Oh, I'm a great fan of traditional American cuisine. Stephen brightened, and his eyes sparkled. Chicken noodle soup with homemade broth, beef stew with vegetables. Potatoes with mushrooms, chili with beans. And homemade baking? That's a whole story in itself. Apple pie, cornbread, Thanksgiving pancakes. Thin, airy, pumpkin pie for the holidays. Nowadays everyone buys ready-made in stores, but homemade tastes completely different. It has soul, the warmth of human hands. I couldn't agree more. Catherine exclaimed, forgetting her restraint. I love baking, it's my main passion after gardening. I still have old recipes from my great-grandmother, written in her own hand in a thick notebook. The pies come out finger-licking good. Especially apple pie with cinnamon. The whole house fills with the aroma. How I would love to taste real homemade baking, Stephen sighed dreamily. I haven't eaten anything like that in so long. Cafes and restaurants can't compare. Everything's made with margarine and preservatives. But the smell of a real pie in the oven, that's pure poetry. I have a real wood-fired oven at home, Catherine couldn't help but say. My grandfather installed it himself, following all the rules. I bake bread in it, pies, cook roasts. The flavor is completely different. A wood-fired oven. Stephen even half rose with excitement. That's a dream. I've always said a wood-fired oven is the heart of the house, its soul. I remember my grandmother had one in her little village. The smell of bread, the warmth that filled the entire home. They talked for another hour and a half, moving from topic to topic, marveling at how much their views coincided. It turned out that Stephen, like Catherine, disliked noisy crowds, preferred quiet evenings with a book, adored old American movies _Casablanca _ Gone with the Wind _ on the waterfront . He told her he collected records of classical music and jazz, and dreamed of having a dog, a big, kind one, like a golden retriever or a Labrador. By the way, do you have any pets? He asked. A cat, Catherine smiled. Rusty, a ginger Persian. The smartest cat, he's lived with me for 8 years. He's like family, understands everything. I love cats, Stephen assured her. Such wise animals, independent. They sense people better than any psychologist. Catherine caught herself thinking she didn't want to part. Stephen was exactly the kind of man she had dreamed of, intelligent, sensitive, someone who valued simple human joys. And he was so well-mannered, he handed her coat when she stood up, held the door, paid for the coffee despite her protests, and escorted her to her car. May I call you? He asked at parting, looking into her eyes with such hope that Catherine's heart skipped a beat. I'd like to continue getting to know you. If you don't mind, of course. It's been a long time since I've met such an interesting conversationalist. Of course you may, Catherine blushed, writing her number into his expensive smartphone. Goodbye, Catherine, he gallantly kissed her hand, like a true gentleman from an old movie. I hope we see each other very soon. On her way home, Catherine felt like the heroine of a romantic film. In the rearview mirror she saw Marina's red car following behind. Her friend honked several times and waved. Apparently she was also pleased with the outcome of her matchmaking. At home, Rusty greeted his mistress in a very strange way. Usually he purred at the doorstep and rubbed his face against her legs, but now he sat in the hallway at a distance, sniffing intently as though analyzing unfamiliar scents. What's wrong with you, silly one? Catherine tried to pick him up, but the cat sharply dodged and ran into the bedroom, grumbling in displeasure. Very strange. Rusty had never behaved like this before. Maybe he smelled another man? Cats are very jealous, especially of their mistresses. That evening Marina called. Catherine was sitting in her favorite rocking chair, sipping herbal tea and trying to calm Rusty, who still hadn't come near her since she returned. The cat had settled on the windowsill, staring into the dark garden, occasionally grumbling. "Well," her friend's voice carried poorly concealed excitement. "Did you like my Stephen? Isn't he a wonderful man?" "Very much," Catherine admitted, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks at the mere memory of that day. "So intelligent, we spoke about so many important things. As if we've known each other all our lives." "I told you so," Marina exclaimed triumphantly. "My female intuition never lets me down. He's perfect for you in age, in interests, in character. Just don't take too long to answer if he calls. Good men don't wait long, they're quickly taken." "And he really is divorced?" Catherine suddenly asked. "I don't know why, but I want to be sure." "Of course he's divorced," Marina replied quickly. "Officially, with all the papers. His wife turned out to be a greedy shrew, only drained him for money. It's good he realized in time and left. Now he's looking for a calm, homely woman who will value him for his human qualities, not for the thickness of his wallet." After talking with her friend, Catherine couldn't fall asleep for a long time. She replayed every word, every glance from Stephen. How long it had been since she felt such a thrill. The last 2 years, after breaking up with Andrew, had passed in work and caring for the house. She had almost forgotten what it was like to wait for a man's call. Stephen called the very next day, around 10 in the morning. Catherine was watering flowers on the veranda and jumped at the sudden ringing of the phone. "Good morning, Catherine," his velvet voice made her heart beat faster. "I hope I'm not calling too early. I wanted to invite you for a walk in the autumn park. Today is such a wonderful day, the sun, a light breeze. The perfect time for a romantic stroll among the golden leaves." "With pleasure," Catherine replied, trying to keep her voice calm, though inside everything was singing with joy. They met in the Central Park an hour later. Stephen looked even better than yesterday: an elegant gray coat, a cashmere scarf, expensive leather gloves. In his hands he held a small bouquet of asters, modest, yet refined. "For you," he gallantly offered the flowers. "I saw them in the flower shop and thought they suited you perfectly. As delicate and beautiful as you." Catherine blushed at the compliment. It had been so long since anyone had given her flowers just like that, without a reason. The walk turned out to be wonderful. They strolled along paths covered in leaves, talking about books, about the beauty of American nature, about how important it is to notice the beautiful in simple things. Stephen proved to be not only well-read but also observant. He pointed out to Catherine the most picturesque views, drew her attention to the play of light and shadow between the branches, quoted lines from Frost and Whitman that astonishingly suited the autumn landscape. "You know," he said when they sat down on a bench by the pond, "I thought about our conversation all night. It is so rare to meet someone with whom you can speak about everything, both lofty and ordinary things of life. With you, I feel at home." "I'm also very glad we met," Catherine admitted softly. "After breaking up with Andrew, I thought I would never be able to entrust my heart to anyone again." "Andrew is your former boyfriend?" Stephen clarified delicately. "Yes. We were together for almost a year, but he didn't understand my love for country life. He kept saying it was time to sell my grandfather's house and move into a city apartment. He said I was burying myself in the wilderness, that I needed to live a modern life." "What nonsense!" Stephen exclaimed sincerely. "To sell a family nest for the sake of a city box? That's barbaric. Such a house is not just property, it's history, the memory of generations, roots. I would beg you on my knees never to part with such a treasure." There was so much passion in his words that Catherine felt the last ice of distrust melt in her heart. At last, a man who understood her. The next day Stephen invited her to an art museum. Catherine had long planned to go, but never found the time. It turned out Stephen not only loved painting, but also knew an astonishing amount about American artists. He spoke of the creative biographies of masters, explained the particularities of their techniques, shared interesting facts. "Here is Homer," he said, standing before a famous painting of an autumn landscape. He knew how to capture not just a landscape, but the mood, the very soul of American nature. Look at how these maples are painted. You almost hear the rustle of the leaves, feel the coolness of the autumn air. Can you imagine how beautiful such a landscape would look in the living room of a country house? Against the backdrop of a fireplace, beside bookshelves, and the soft light of a floor lamp. I have a fireplace at home, Catherine said involuntarily, and immediately marveled at her own openness. My grandfather built a real wood-burning one from red brick. On winter evenings it's so pleasant to sit by the fire with a book. It can't be! Stephen exclaimed in delight, and his eyes lit up with such genuine wonder that Catherine felt proud of her home. A real fireplace. How lucky you are. An evening by the fireplace with a good book and a cup of tea, that's the highest delight for a refined soul. And do you have something like that at home? Catherine asked. Stephen's face darkened slightly. Unfortunately, no. I rent a small apartment in a high-rise. After the divorce, I had to move out of my own place. My wife kept all the property. But it's only temporary, he added quickly. I'll save up money and definitely buy a house in the country. I've dreamed of it my whole life. And what prevents you now? Catherine asked cautiously. The prices are very high, and loans come with huge interest, Stephen sighed. And finding the right house isn't so simple either. I don't want just a box, but a place with history, with soul, like yours. I'm ready to wait for years, save, but find exactly what's right. On their third date, he gave her not just a bouquet, but a whole arrangement of white roses, gypsophila, and greenery, beautifully arranged in a wicker basket. With the flowers came a box of expensive handmade chocolates. This is too much, Catherine said shyly, accepting the gifts. For a special woman, nothing is too much, Stephen replied gallantly. You deserve the very best. Catherine decided on an important step. She invited him for tea at her home. She spent the entire week preparing for the visit. She cleaned the house to perfection, baked her grandmother's apple pie with cinnamon, brewed herbal tea from her own herbs, mint, lemon balm, thyme. All the way home she worried. What if he was disappointed? What if the house seemed too old-fashioned, too provincial? After all, he was a city man, used to modern comforts. But her fears proved entirely groundless. Stephen was thrilled with everything from the wrought iron gates with grapevine motifs, the paved path leading to the house, the carved window frames, to the old solid oak front door. My God, how beautiful! He stopped on the threshold, taking in the hallway with its oak staircase and stained glass window on the landing. This is a real mansion in miniature. In the living room, his admiration knew no bounds. He examined the antique furniture, the carved mahogany sideboard, the leather armchair, the round table on curved legs. He approached the bookshelves, respectfully touching the volumes and leather bindings. A complete collection of the classics, he whispered, as though he were in a temple. Twain, Melville, James. And all in old editions. This is a priceless library. Grandfather collected them his whole life, Catherine explained. He was a very educated man despite his simple origins. He used to say that books are the best inheritance one can leave descendants. But the fireplace aroused Stephen's greatest delight. He examined the poker, tongs, and ash shovel with care. A real American fireplace. He ran his hand over the warm brick. You can feel the hand of a craftsman. And what wood do you use? Mostly oak, Catherine replied. Grandfather stocked it himself, and I carry on the tradition. I have a woodshed where it dries for 2 years. Exactly right. Only dry oak logs give true heat and aroma, Stephen nodded approvingly. They walked out onto the veranda, from which the garden could be seen. The October sun gilded the crowns of the apple trees, and the last dahlias blazed with bright colors in the flower beds. How beautiful! Stephen stood by the window, admiring the view. This is a true family hearth, a place where one can be truly happy. You can feel that people lived here who loved each other and loved this house. My grandparents lived together for 45 years, Catherine said, pouring tea into porcelain cups. Until their deaths they held hands like newlyweds. Every morning grandfather brought grandmother flowers from the garden, sometimes a rose, sometimes a peony, sometimes just a sprig of lilac. This is true love, Stephen sighed. You rarely see that nowadays. Everyone tends to scatter at the first difficulties, unwilling to work on a relationship, to build something together. The only one who didn't share in the general admiration and warmth was Rusty. At Stephen's arrival, the cat demonstratively left the living room and shut himself up in the bedroom. And when the guest tried to coax and pet him, a menacing hiss rang out so sharp that Stephen pulled his hand back. Sorry about him, Catherine said with embarrassment as she poured the tea. He's usually not this aggressive. Probably he treats strangers with suspicion. Or maybe he's jealous of me with guests. No big deal, Stephen smiled, though Catherine noticed the smile was somewhat forced, and a flash of irritation appeared in his eyes. Animals sometimes behave unpredictably. Maybe you should take him to the vet? Perhaps something hurts and that's why he's nervous. No, he's fine. We had a checkup recently. He just has a peculiar, independent character. I see, Stephen nodded. Cats are creatures of delicate inner organization. But once they grow attached, they become the most loyal of friends. The evening passed wonderfully. They sat by the fireplace Catherine had lit it especially for the guests' arrival, drank tea with homemade pie, and talked about books, about life, about plans for the future. Stephen spoke about his work at the bank, about how tired he was of city bustle and how he dreamed of a quiet family life. You know, Catherine, he said when he was already preparing to leave, this evening has been a real revelation for me. I realized what I've been missing all these years: a true home, comfort, a woman who creates that comfort. Thank you for this wonderful evening. When Stephen left, Rusty immediately appeared in the living room and spent a long time sniffing the chair where the guest had sat. Then he approached Catherine and began rubbing himself insistently against her legs, as if erasing a foreign smell. And at night he settled down to sleep right on the bedroom threshold, as though guarding his mistress from some invisible danger. The next 3 weeks flew by like a fairy tale. Stephen called every day, came on weekends, and with each meeting Catherine grew more convinced that she had finally met her person. He not only shared her interests but seemed to read her thoughts. It was enough for her to mention her favorite variety of roses, and the next day he appeared with exactly those flowers. Once she told him she adored old American jazz standards, and 2 days later Stephen brought a record of Ella Fitzgerald and suggested they listen to it together by the fireplace. How do you guess all my preferences? Catherine marveled when he once again amazed her with his accuracy of choice. This time the gift was a rare book on gardening, published back in the 19th century. Kindred spirits have the same tastes, Stephen replied with that special smile that made Catherine's head spin. I just feel that you'll like it. Marina, too, never ceased to marvel at the fortunate acquaintance. She called almost every day, asked about the progress of the relationship, gave advice. Hold on to him tightly, her friend said. You won't find such men even in broad daylight. And don't delay your decision, in our times good options don't wait long. But we've only known each other a month, Catherine objected. Isn't it too early to speak of a serious relationship? Not at all. At our age, taking too long to look someone over is a luxury we can't afford. You see how he treats you, how he admires your home. Indeed, Stephen did not hide his delight at the cottage. Every time he came, he found something new to admire. Now he would point out the intricate carving of the window frames, then marvel at the antique tiles on the stove, then spend a long time studying photographs of her grandparents in silver frames. What a rich family history you have, he said, leafing through an old album. Here's your grandfather, a true American intellectual. You can see on his face an intelligent, kind man. And your grandmother, what a beauty she was. You look so much like her. Stephen was especially interested in the outbuildings and the technical details of the house. He asked in detail about the heating, the water supply, the condition of the foundation and the roof. You see, he explained his curiosity, I've dreamed of my own house all my life, so I study all the details. I want to know what to look out for when buying, what hidden problems there may be. And are the papers for the house in order? He once asked casually. Of course, Catherine replied. Everything was reissued to me after my grandmother's death. Certificate of ownership, technical passport, documents from the municipal office. Everything as it should be. That's very important, Stephen nodded seriously. Do you know how many problems there are now with real estate because of improperly executed papers? It's good that yours are clean. The only fly in the ointment was Rusty's behavior. The cat categorically refused to accept Stephen, and with every visit became more aggressive. As soon as the guest entered the house, Rusty would start hissing, arching his back, and demonstratively marking corners, something he had never done before. "What's wrong with you?" Catherine grieved, cleaning up after the cat. "You're well behaved, smart. Why are you acting like a savage?" But what worried her most was that Rusty began refusing food. At first she thought he was just being picky, but when for 3 days in a row the cat only sniffed his favorite canned food and walked away from the bowl, Catherine became seriously concerned. "Maybe he's sick?" Stephen suggested when Catherine told him about the problem. "You should show him to a vet. Cats sometimes hide illnesses until it gets really bad." The veterinary clinic was in the neighboring town, 20 minutes drive from the house. Catherine made an appointment with Dr. Williams, an elderly, experienced doctor her neighbors had once recommended. Rusty behaved strangely in the carrier. Usually he protested car rides, but now he sat quietly, only occasionally meowing plaintively. In the clinic he let the doctor examine him without resistance, which was unlike him as well. Dr. Williams, a gray-haired man of about 60 with kind eyes behind glasses, examined the cat thoroughly. He listened to his heart and lungs, checked his teeth and gums, palpated his abdomen, took his temperature. "Physically the cat is fine," he concluded, stroking the now calm Rusty. "His heart is working normally, digestion is not impaired, there are no signs of infection." "And how old is he?" 8, Catherine answered. "A good age, a mature cat." "Tell me, has there been any stress lately? A move, the arrival of new people in the house, a change in routine?" Catherine paused and thought. "There was no move, the routine is the same. Unless my friend has started coming to the house," she said uncertainly. "A man, we've been seeing each other for a month." "Ah, I see," the veterinarian drawled. "So that's the matter. You know, cats are very subtle psychologists. They sense people much better than we do. If a cat reacts so sharply to the presence of a new person, refuses food, marks territory, that's a serious signal." "What kind of signal?" Catherine asked in alarm. Dr. Williams removed his glasses, wiped them, and looked at Catherine attentively. "You see, I've been a veterinarian for 30 years. And I've often observed how pets warn their owners of danger. They feel a person's energy, his true intentions. When a cat so categorically rejects someone, it's worth listening to his opinion." "But it's just jealousy," Catherine tried to object. "Rusty is used to being the only man in the house." "Perhaps," the doctor agreed, "but I can give you some advice. Watch the cat's behavior when this person is around. Animals don't know how to lie. If he continues to be nervous, it's worth thinking about." On the way home, Catherine pondered the veterinarian's words. Could it really be that Rusty sensed something wrong about Stephen? But what could possibly be wrong with such a wonderful man? He was educated, well-mannered, attentive. True, sometimes his questions about the house seemed overly detailed, but that was natural after all. He dreamed of owning his own country property. At home, Rusty immediately perked up. He devoured an entire can of food with appetite, purred, rubbed himself against his mistress's legs. As if he only wanted to show he was fine, the problem wasn't with his health. In the evening, Stephen called. "How's our patient?" "The doctor said he's healthy," Catherine replied. "Just stress from new circumstances." "I see. It's nothing, he'll get used to it. Animals are conservatives, they don't like change. By the way, tomorrow is Saturday, may I come over? I want to help you in the garden, rake the leaves, prepare the flower beds for winter." Catherine agreed, though she noticed that when she mentioned tomorrow's visit, Rusty, who was dozing at her feet, twitched his ears uneasily. Saturday turned out clear but chilly. Stephen arrived early in work clothes, with gardening gloves and tools. A real helper. Catherine rejoiced. "I was just about to start the cleanup." They worked in the garden until noon. Stephen proved surprisingly skillful and knowledgeable. He properly trimmed the faded perennials, skillfully covered the roses for winter, and prepared the flower beds competently. Catherine admired him and thought how wonderful it was to have a reliable helper by her side. "You have such a large property," Stephen said as they took a break. "How many acres?" "Almost 4, Catherine replied. "Grandfather bought it with a large farmstead in mind. He wanted to keep a cow, pigs, chickens. 4 acres in a place like this." Stephen looked over the property with an appraising eye. "Do you know how much such real estate is worth now?" "I've never looked into it." Catherine was surprised at the odd question. "Why should I know? I'm not going to sell." Of course, Stephen quickly agreed. "Just curious." Country property is very valuable now, especially one with history and in such condition. After lunch, as they sat on the veranda with tea, Stephen suddenly asked, "Catherine, don't you feel lonely living here? The nearest neighbors are far away if something happens." "It's fine," Catherine shrugged. "I'm used to it. And Rusty is better than any guard. He'll sense right away if a stranger shows up." "But what if you suddenly needed to leave urgently?" "Leaving the house for long is dangerous. It could be robbed, and the garden needs tending. Where would I go?" Catherine laughed. "This is my home. My life is here." "Well, you never know. Maybe you'll want to travel or go on a business trip. Or if you get married, you might need to change something in your life then." There was a certain tone in his voice that made Catherine look at him more closely. But Stephen was already smiling his usual charming smile. Rusty didn't show himself in the yard all day. Only in the evening, after Stephen left, did he appear on the veranda and spend a long time sniffing the spots where the guest had sat. Then he began licking himself intensely, as though washing off something unpleasant. "Why do you keep snorting at him?" Catherine asked, scratching the cat behind his ear. "He's a good man, he helps us." Rusty looked at her with his green eyes in such a way that it seemed as though he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Then he meowed softly and lay down at her feet, resting his heavy head on his paws. On Monday, Marina dropped by without warning, as she often did. But this time she seemed anxious, constantly glancing at her watch and nervously fiddling with her handbag. "How are things with Stephen?" she asked as soon as she stepped inside. "Good," Catherine replied. "On Saturday he helped in the garden, turned out to be very handy." "That's wonderful." Marina rejoiced. "So, the relationship is developing? And have you talked about the future yet?" "Not yet. It's too soon. We've only known each other a month and a half." "Oh, nonsense," her friend waved her hands. "At our age, every day counts. If a man is serious, he won't delay with a proposal. And if he does, it means he's unsure or looking for something better." "Marina, I think you're rushing things." "I'm a realist," her friend interrupted. "And I want you to be happy. Stephen is the perfect match for you. Just don't let him slip away." After Marina left, Catherine thought about her words for a long time. Was it really worth rushing? Or was it better to let the relationship develop naturally? She was happy as it was. Wasn't that enough? Rusty lay on the windowsill, gazing out at the garden where the last leaves on the apple trees had already turned yellow. Winter would come soon, and the house would be wrapped in white snowdrifts. She wondered, would Stephen still come in winter? And what would he say then about the hardships of country life, the fact that the road wasn't always cleared, that sometimes the electricity went out, that the fireplace had to be lit every day? For some reason these thoughts troubled Catherine, though she couldn't understand why. November turned out rainy and raw. The yellow leaves had turned into brown mush underfoot, and the gray sky seemed to have lost the sun altogether. In such weather loneliness was felt especially sharply, and Catherine waited impatiently for Stephen's calls. He really did keep coming despite the bad weather, and that could not help but please her. Not every man would agree to drive out to the country in such slush, Marina said, who now called almost every day. It means he's serious about you. I told you he was perfect. But the closer her relationship with Stephen grew, the more restless Rusty became. The cat almost stopped eating when the guest was in the house, and at night he wandered through the rooms, meowing plaintively. More than once Catherine woke to find him scratching at the bedroom door, as if trying to warn her of some danger. "Maybe you should give the cat to someone else for a while," Stephen suggested, after Rusty once again marked his boots in the hallway. "He's clearly suffering, and he's bothering us too. Do you have friends who could look after him?" "Rusty is family. It's not his fault he's struggling with the changes. He just needs time to get used to it." Of course, Stephen quickly agreed, but Catherine noticed that he pressed his lips together and a flicker of irritation crossed his eyes. "It's just a pity for the animal. You can see he's in distress." On one of those gloomy days, Catherine decided to take a walk in the city park. She needed to think, to sort out her feelings. On the one hand, Stephen was exactly the kind of man she had dreamed of. On the other, something elusive in their relationship had begun to trouble her. Could it really be only Rusty and his jealousy? The park at that time of year was almost empty. Bare tree branches loomed black against the leaden sky, and the few passers-by hurried along the wet paths, hiding under umbrellas. Catherine walked slowly down the same alley where she had once strolled with her grandmother. Every bench here held memories of childhood. "Girl, wait," someone called out to her. Catherine turned and saw an elderly woman in a dark headscarf hurrying toward her. The stranger was small, with a kind, wrinkled face and astonishingly clear blue eyes. "Excuse me," the woman panted slightly as she caught up with Catherine. "I've been looking for you for half an hour. I saw you enter the park, and I knew I had to speak with you." "I'm sorry, but do we know each other?" Catherine asked in surprise. "We don't, but that doesn't matter." The woman looked at her closely. "My name is Anna. How should I say? See through people. I've had the gift since childhood. And around you, girl, there is a dark aura. Trouble is coming." "What kind of trouble?" Catherine asked involuntarily, her unease rising. Something in the stranger's voice made her believe every word. "Beside you there is an unclean man, selfish. He pretends to be good, but he harbors evil intentions." Anna took Catherine's hand. "Show me your palm." For some reason Catherine didn't resist. The woman studied the lines carefully, shook her head. "I see. The man beside you is not who he seems. He only wants your gorgeous country cottage, girl. And you yourself, you're just an addition to the property." Catherine's heart clenched painfully. Those exact words, gorgeous cottage, she had heard from Stephen more than once. "How do you know about the cottage?" she whispered. "I see everything," Anna smiled sadly, "and I see that you're being deceived. There is another woman beside him, someone close to you, but a traitor. They're acting together against you." "That's impossible," Catherine began, but the woman interrupted her. "Do you want to know the truth? Set a test. Tell him you'll have to sell the cottage, say debts have appeared. Watch how he reacts." "But why should I believe you?" Catherine asked, bewildered. "You're a complete stranger." Anna released her hand and stepped back. "Because your pet at home feels it all. A ginger cat, right? A smart creature is warning you in every way it can. Listen to him, they don't lie." "You even know about Rusty?" Catherine exclaimed. "Animals are my helpers," the woman explained. "They sense lies a mile away. Your cat is trying to protect you, and you're not listening. In vain." Anna was about to leave, but suddenly she stopped and looked back. "And one more thing, girl. True love waits for you where there is the smell of fresh bread and where skillful hands create goodness. Don't miss it when the time comes." The woman melted into the gray trees as suddenly as she had appeared. Catherine stood for a long time on the same spot, digesting what she had heard. Reason told her it was all superstition, nonsense. But her heart pounded, and the words kept spinning in her head, "He only wants your gorgeous cottage, All the way home she thought about the strange encounter. Could her suspicions really have a foundation? Could it be that Stephen was not who he seemed? But he was so attentive, so caring. Although, if she thought about it, All his compliments had been about the house, the garden, the family comfort. And what had he said about her herself? At home, Rusty greeted her with happy purring and rubbed against her legs for a long time, as if he had missed her. When Catherine sat down in the chair, he leapt into her lap and looked straight into her eyes. His gaze held such human-like anxiety that Catherine hugged him involuntarily. "Do you really feel that something is wrong?" she whispered. "If only you could speak." Rusty meowed softly and laid his head on her hand, as though comforting her. In the evening, Stephen called. "How are you, my dear? Not feeling lonely?" "I'm fine," Catherine answered, trying to make her voice sound natural. "And you?" "Work is a lot. I get tired. I dream of the weekends, when I can come to you. It's so peaceful there, so good. A true family hearth." "Stephen, what if I had to sell the house?" Catherine asked suddenly, almost without realizing, recalling the advice of the strange woman. There was silence on the line. Then Stephen repeated uncertainly. "Sell? Why? Did something happen?" "No, nothing, just. Hypothetically. What if circumstances forced me to?" "That would be very foolish." Stephen's voice carried a clear alarm. "Such a house, such a place. You mustn't sell it under any circumstances. Don't you realize this is your greatest treasure?" "Greatest treasure?" Catherine echoed. "I thought the greatest treasure was love, family, relationships between people." Of course, Stephen quickly corrected himself. "I meant material treasure. A house is the foundation of stability, roots. Without a home, a person is like tumbleweed." After the conversation, Catherine sat in her chair for a long time, trying to sort out her feelings. Something in Stephen's reaction to the mention of selling the house struck her as odd. His reaction had been too intense, his attempts to dissuade her too hasty. The next day, Marina arrived unexpectedly. She looked agitated and immediately began asking questions. "You didn't say anything strange to Stephen yesterday, did you? Today he's not himself, gloomy. And how do you know what he's like today?" Catherine asked in surprise. Marina hesitated for a second, then quickly replied. "Well, he's my colleague, I see him at work. Usually he's so sociable, and today he's walking around sullen." "I only asked what he thought about selling property," Catherine said cautiously. "In general terms." "Are you out of your mind?" Marina exclaimed. "Why say such nonsense? He'll think you're planning to sell the house. And what if he does?" Catherine looked closely at her friend's face. "If a man loves me, then surely it's not the house that interests him most of all?" "That's not the point," Marina flared. "You just shouldn't frighten a man ahead of time. Men are like that, hear something wrong and immediately panic. Better wait until the relationship is fully defined." "Defined?" Catherine repeated. "Are there some plans?" Marina hesitated again, as if she had said too much. "Well, I think he'll propose soon. By all signs, he's serious." "By what signs?" Catherine pressed. "It's obvious. The way he looks at you, the way he speaks of the house. Not every man would drive so far without serious intentions." After Marina left, Catherine felt even more confused. Something in her friend's behavior seemed strange. She was far too agitated over some casual conversation. And how did she know so much about Stephen's mood? Rusty sat on the windowsill, watching the departing red car. Then he turned to Catherine and meowed loudly as if trying to say something important. "I'm beginning to understand you," Catherine admitted, taking the cat into her arms. "Maybe you really do sense what I can't see." On Saturday, Stephen arrived with a huge bouquet of red roses and a box of expensive chocolates. He was especially gallant and attentive, but Catherine noticed that in his eyes flickered something resembling anxiety. "I've been thinking all week about our conversation," he said when they were sitting in the living room by the fireplace. "About what you mentioned, selling the house. I hope that's not a serious plan." "No, of course not," Catherine reassured him. "Sometimes I just think, what if circumstances forced me?" Circumstances must not force you, Stephen said firmly. Such an inheritance must be guarded like the apple of your eye. You know what? If you ever face financial difficulties, you'd better come to me. I'll help, lend money, do whatever it takes, but I won't allow you to part with your family nest. There was such sincerity in his words that Catherine felt ashamed of her suspicions. Had she really let herself be influenced by some strange woman in the park? But when they went to the kitchen to prepare dinner, Catherine noticed Stephen examining very carefully a new folder with documents that lay on the table. These were papers from the municipal office. She had ordered them for the tax authorities. Updating the technical passport, he asked casually. Yes, I need it for reporting, Catherine replied. You're doing the right thing. Documents must always be in order. Stephen nodded approvingly, but she noticed how greedily his eyes lingered on the numbers on the papers. That evening, after the guest had left, Rusty spent a long time sniffing the folder of documents, then snorted loudly and turned away demonstratively. As if to say, see what really interests him? Catherine took the cat in her arms and whispered, Tomorrow I'll try to find out the truth. If you're right, if he's deceiving me. Forgive me for not listening to you sooner. Rusty purred and rubbed his face against her cheek. In his green eyes there was relief. At last his mistress was beginning to understand him. On Sunday morning Catherine awoke with a firm decision to get to the truth. The words of the mysterious Anna gave her no peace, and Rusty's behavior grew ever more eloquent. She had to act before it was too late. At breakfast she thought over her plan. Stephen had never invited her to his home, always finding reasonable excuses: repairs, disorder, noisy neighbors. But what if she simply went without warning? She knew his address. Rusty sat on the windowsill, watching her intently, as if guessing her intentions. When Catherine stood up and began to get ready, the cat leapt down and followed her to the door, purring loudly. For the first time in weeks, his behavior radiated approval. House number 12 on Maple Street turned out to be an old 3-story building with peeling paint and sagging steps. Catherine climbed to the second floor. Stephen had said he lived in apartment number 6. After standing for a few minutes at the door, she gathered her courage and rang the bell. The door was opened by an unfamiliar woman of about 45 in a housecoat. Who are you looking for? She asked suspiciously. Excuse me, I'm looking for Stephen, Catherine said. Does he live here? Stephen? The woman raised her eyebrows in surprise. And who might you be? I'm a friend of his. He gave me this address. Strange, the landlady shook her head. Stephen has been renting a room here for 6 months, but he's never brought anyone over. He said he was single, divorced. But he's not here now. He left yesterday evening, said he was going to his girlfriend's. Catherine's heart clenched painfully. So Stephen really was renting just a single room. And he had a girlfriend he had never mentioned. Could you describe this girlfriend? Catherine asked cautiously. Tall, slim, short hair. Drives a red car. Sometimes she calls him. I hear how he talks to her. So tender, affectionate. Calls her my little Marina. The ground seemed to fall out from under her. Marina. Her best friend Marina, who had so eagerly arranged their acquaintance. Thank you, Catherine whispered and hurried away before she fainted right there on the landing. In the car she sat for a long time, unable to start the engine. Her hands trembled, her head pounded. Betrayal, deceit, conspiracy. So it had all been planned in advance. Marina had deliberately introduced her to Stephen, and he had studied her tastes and habits to appear the perfect man. But why? For what purpose had they staged this elaborate game? The answer came by itself. The mysterious woman in the park had been right. The cottage. They wanted her house, her land, the property that grew more valuable every year. She herself was just an obstacle to be maneuvered around. Catherine drove home as if in a fog. Rusty met her at the doorstep and instantly understood something had changed. He rubbed against her legs, purred, as if rejoicing that his mistress had finally opened her eyes. You were right, my clever one, Catherine said softly, lifting the cat into her arms. Forgive me for not listening. Now I need to think what to do next. That evening Stephen called. Catherine stared at his name on the screen for a long time before answering. "Hello, darling," his voice sounded as tender and caring as ever. "How are you? Do you miss me?" "Everything's fine," Catherine answered evenly. "And where are you now?" "At home, of course," Stephen lied without hesitation. "Reading, relaxing. I have an important meeting at work tomorrow, preparing for it." Liar. Brazen, shameless liar. Catherine clenched her teeth to stop herself from blurting out everything she thought of him. "Stephen, I've been thinking," she began, deciding to carry the test through to the end. "Remember we spoke of financial troubles? I really have run into some problems." "What kind of problems?" His voice immediately tightened with alarm. "A notice came from the tax office. It turns out my grandmother had unpaid debts, and now I must settle them. The sum is large, almost $200,000. $200,000? Stephen couldn't hide his horror. "But that's a catastrophe." "Yes, I'll have to sell the house," Catherine continued calmly. "The realtor said it could be sold quickly for $700,000, though the market value is higher. But what can I do? I need the money urgently." There was a long silence on the line. Then Stephen spoke again, his voice different now, tense, calculating. "Catherine, don't rush into decisions. Maybe there are other ways to solve the problem? Loans, installments." "No, I've already thought it through," Catherine said firmly. "I'll put up an ad tomorrow. The sooner I sell, the better." "But where will you go then?" Panic was now naked in Stephen's voice. "I'll rent an apartment in the city. The remaining money will be enough for a comfortable life. Country living, you know, involves a lot of chores. Maybe it really is time to change something." After the call, Catherine turned off the phone. Everything was now crystal clear. Stephen's reaction left no doubt about his true motives. A loving man would have been concerned first and foremost about her state, her feelings. But he cared only about the fate of the property. That night she couldn't sleep. Catherine sat by the window, looking at the sleeping garden and trying to understand how she could have been so wrong about people. Stephen had seemed so sincere, so understanding. And Marina? Her best friend since university, her only close person after her parents' death. Rusty curled up on her lap, purring softly. His warmth and loyalty were especially precious now. In the morning, as expected, Marina was the first to call. Her voice carried poorly hidden agitation. "Catherine, what on earth did you tell Stephen yesterday? Today he's like a madman asking nonstop about your debts. And why does that concern you?" Catherine asked coldly. "What do you mean, why? I arranged your relationship, I worry about you too. Why frighten him with some problems?" "Strange," Catherine said thoughtfully. "How do you know he's asking about debts? I thought you were just colleagues." Marina faltered. "Well, he told me himself. He's worried about you, wants to help." "I see. And where were you yesterday evening?" "At home, of course." "Why?" "Nothing, just curious." After the conversation, Catherine was fully convinced of her suspicions. She had to bring the matter to its end, see them together, hear their plans. Only then could she make her final decision. In the afternoon, she drove into the city and parked not far from the bank where Marina worked. At 5 o'clock, when the workday ended, a familiar figure in a red coat came out of the building. Marina looked around and headed toward her car. Catherine carefully followed at a distance. The red car wove through the city streets until it stopped by a small cafe on the outskirts. Marina got out and went inside. A few minutes later, a taxi pulled up to the cafe, and Stephen stepped out. He glanced quickly around and then disappeared inside as well. Catherine parked so she could see the cafe windows and waited. About 20 minutes later, Stephen and Marina came out together. They were arguing heatedly, waving their hands. Then Stephen put his arm around Marina's shoulders, and they headed toward her car. There was no more room for doubt. Catherine started the engine and drove home. She needed to prepare for the final act. At home, she took an old but working recorder from the closet, the one she had once used for recording client interviews. Tomorrow, Stephen would certainly come. News of selling the house would not leave him indifferent. And then, tomorrow we'll learn the whole truth, she told Rusty, who was lying beside her on the couch. And if I'm right, those two will get what they deserve. The cat meowed in reply, and in his green eyes there was a look of determination. He too was preparing for battle. The next morning Stephen called earlier than usual. Catherine, may I come today? We need to talk seriously about your problems. I spent the whole night thinking of how I could help you. Of course, come, Catherine answered calmly. I'll be waiting. She prepared carefully for the meeting. She hid the recorder inside a vase on the table. From there it would capture the conversation well. She asked Rusty to stay in the bedroom. She didn't want the cat to get hurt in the coming scene. Stephen arrived around 2 in the afternoon. He looked agitated and immediately began asking about the debts, the tax office, the plans for selling. Catherine, you've decided too hastily, he said, pacing the living room. You need to think it through, consult with lawyers. But why? Catherine shrugged. A house is just property. I'll sell one, buy another. But not all property is the same. Stephen almost shouted. This house is special, unique. You'll never find another like it. For me, the house is valuable only for the memories, Catherine said calmly. And I'll take the memories with me. Stephen stopped in the middle of the room and stared at her. Something new appeared in his eyes, calculating, cold. Catherine, what if I buy your house myself? He suddenly suggested. You? Catherine was surprised. But you don't have that kind of money. I'll find it, borrow it, Stephen assured hastily. The main thing is not to sell to outsiders. Let the house stay in the family. In the family? Catherine repeated. Stephen came closer and took her hands. Catherine, I've long wanted to say this. Marry me. Then the house will remain ours, and you won't have to sell anything. There it was, the true face. A marriage proposal at the very moment when the property was at risk. Catherine could barely restrain herself from bursting out laughing. Marry you? She tried to look bewildered, though inside she was boiling with outrage. But it's so sudden. We barely even know each other. What are you saying? Stephen dropped to one knee in a theatrical pose. From the first day I knew you were my destiny. So kind, so good at keeping house, so understanding. And your home is like something out of a fairy tale. We'll be so happy here. And where would we live? Catherine asked innocently. You do have your own apartment. Stephen hesitated for a moment. Of course, here. Why would we need the city apartment when we have such a wonderful house? I've long dreamed of country life. But this house is my property. What about the documents after marriage? Nonsense, Stephen waved his hand. There shouldn't be secrets between spouses. We'll re-register it in both our names, or in mine. What difference does it make? The important thing is that we'll be together. Catherine barely restrained herself from slapping him. So he wasn't even hiding his intentions to re-register everything to himself right after the wedding. And then, most likely, divorce her and leave her with nothing. I need time to think, she said. It's such an important decision. Of course, darling, Stephen stood up and hugged her. Just don't take too long. In the meantime, postpone selling the house. Since we might get married, why create unnecessary problems? After he left, Catherine listened to the recording on the recorder. Everything was clear, every word audible. Especially telling was the phrase about re-registering the house. But it still wasn't enough. She needed more solid evidence. That evening she called Marina. Can you imagine? Stephen proposed to me. Really? Her friend's voice carried contradictory tones, joy mixed with something else. Congratulations. So when's the wedding? I don't know yet. I asked for time to think. You know, everything feels too fast. And then, this whole story with the debts. What debts? Marina asked quickly. Well, I told you. The tax office is demanding $200,000 for grandmother's debts. I'll have to sell the house. Are you out of your mind? Marina exclaimed. Why would you sell the house before the wedding? That's your future family nest. What else can I do? I need the money urgently. Listen, Marina's voice turned conspiratorial. Let's meet tomorrow. I'll tell you something. Maybe we can find a way out of this situation. All right, Catherine agreed. Come around 3. The next day, Marina didn't come alone. Stephen stepped out of the red car with her. Catherine watched them from the window. They whispered to each other at the gate before walking up to the house. Hello. Marina entered with a deliberately cheerful air. I brought Stephen with me. I thought, since you're now fiancé and fiancée, you should solve problems together. Of course, Catherine smiled, switching on the hidden recorder. Come in, have a seat. They settled in the living room. Right on cue, Rusty appeared in the doorway, hissed at the guests, and ran away. Stephen winced. Something really has to be done about that cat. After the wedding, perhaps it would be better to place him elsewhere. Why? Catherine asked in surprise. Well, he's aggressive, he might bite the children, Stephen explained. What children? Our future children, Stephen smiled. I want a big family. This house is perfect for a big family. Marina coughed and took the lead. Catherine, Stephen and I talked about your situation. And we came up with a solution. You don't have to sell the house. But where will I get the money? That's the thing. Marina leaned forward. You'll sign a power of attorney giving Stephen the right to manage the property. He'll be able to mortgage the house at the bank, take out a loan against its value. You'll pay off the debts, and the house will stay in the family. But then the house will be pledged to the bank, Catherine objected. Only temporarily, Stephen assured her. We'll see later. The important thing is to keep the property. And why should I sign a power of attorney? Catherine asked. I can go to the bank myself. Marina and Stephen exchanged glances. Well, Stephen has connections in the banking sphere, Marina explained. He can get a loan on better terms. As a private individual, you might be refused. I see, Catherine nodded. And if I refuse this plan? Then you'll have to sell the house, Stephen spread his hands. And then we'll have nowhere to live. What kind of family life is that in a rented apartment? And if the house is sold, then there's no point in marrying either? Catherine asked innocently. Stephen hesitated again. No, of course not. Just, without the house, there won't be that coziness we dream about. Don't worry, Stevie, Marina cut in, and Catherine didn't miss the intimate tone. Catherine's smart, she'll make the right choice. Won't you, Katiusha? Of course, Catherine agreed. Only let me consult a lawyer first about the power of attorney. Why waste money on lawyers? Stephen said quickly. I have a law degree myself, I'll prepare everything correctly. You have a law degree? Catherine asked in surprise. I thought you were an economist. I have 2 degrees, Stephen lied without blinking. Economics and law. Catherine stood and went to the window, pretending to think. In reality, she was trying to hold back her anger. The brazenness of the 2 knew no bounds. You know what, she said, turning back to the guests. Let me think it over until tomorrow. Such important decisions can't be made in haste. But we don't have much time, Marina reminded her. The tax office won't wait. I'll wait until tomorrow, Catherine said firmly. In the meantime, excuse me, I have a headache. I'd like to rest. Stephen and Marina reluctantly got up to leave. At the gate they again spoke in low voices while Catherine watched from the window. Then Stephen showed Marina something on his phone, and she nodded approvingly. When the guests left, Catherine took out the recorder and listened to the tape. Now she had proof of their conspiracy, their plan to seize the house. But she wanted to hear more to understand how long they had been plotting, who had been the instigator. That evening, Catherine made a decision. Tomorrow she would set a trap from which they couldn't escape. But first she had to prepare properly. She called her neighbor, Uncle Bill, a former soldier who lived next door. She asked him to be nearby tomorrow just in case. "Something wrong, Catherine?" the neighbor asked, concerned. "Possibly," Catherine answered honestly. "I'll explain later. Just be close if anything happens." Then she checked all the recordings on the recorder, making sure the batteries were charged. Rusty sat beside her, watching her preparations closely. "Tomorrow will be the decisive day," Catherine told the cat. "We'll see what they're capable of when they realize their plan has failed." In the morning she called Marina. "I've decided to agree to your plan with the power of attorney. Come over and we'll get it done." "Excellent!" Marina exclaimed with delight. "Stephen and I will come right away." "He's already got all the documents prepared." "All the documents prepared?" Catherine repeated. "But yesterday you didn't even know my decision." "Well, Stephen prepared them just in case," Marina faltered, "so we wouldn't waste time." After the call, Catherine smirked. So, they were so confident of success that they had drawn up the papers in advance. Interesting, what else had they prepared? She got her answer an hour later, when two cars pulled up in the yard, Marina's red one and an unfamiliar black one. From the black car stepped a middle-aged man with a briefcase. Apparently, the so-called lawyer. Catherine switched on the recorder and readied herself for the final act of the performance. It was time for the masks to come off. All three entered the house with a solemn air, as if about to conclude an important deal. The man with the briefcase introduced himself as Daniel Robinson, notary. Catherine immediately noticed his cheap suit and how suspiciously fresh the seal on the documents looked. "Sit down," Catherine offered, pointing to the sofa. "Would you like some tea?" "No need," Marina said hastily. "Let's get straight to business. Time is precious." Stephen pulled a folder of documents from the briefcase. "Catherine, here's the prepared power of attorney. Daniel has checked everything, it's legally flawless. All that remains is your signature." "May I read it first?" Catherine asked, taking the papers. Of course, the fake notary agreed. "Though it's all standard. Power of attorney for property management with rights of sale, mortgage, exchange." "Rights of sale?" Catherine asked in surprise. "But we only talked about a mortgage for a loan." "That's just to give full legal authority," Stephen explained. "The bank might require additional guarantees. But of course, I wouldn't sell the house without your consent." Catherine read the document carefully. The power of attorney was drawn up in such a way that it essentially handed Stephen full rights to the property. He could do anything with the house: sell it, gift it, mortgage it. "And here it says the power of attorney is valid for 3 years, she noted. "Isn't that too long?" "Bank procedures take time," Marina explained. "It might take a while to pay off the loan." "I see," Catherine nodded. "Tell me, Stephen, how long have you been planning this marriage?" "What a strange question," Stephen said, puzzled. "Since the moment we met, of course." "Really?" Catherine stood and walked to the window. "Because I think it was from the moment Marina told you about my house." A tense silence fell. Marina nervously licked her lips. "Catherine, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that you're both liars and swindlers," Catherine said calmly, turning to face them. "That there was no chance meeting. Everything was planned in advance." Stephen leapt up from the sofa. "Catherine, what's wrong with you? What nonsense are you saying?" "Nonsense?" Catherine took the recorder out of the vase. "Then listen to this." She played yesterday's recording. Stephen's voice rang out clearly. "We'll re-register it in both our names or in mine." "What difference does it make?" The swindlers' faces went pale. "And here's another interesting recording," Catherine continued, switching to another. "The conversation about mortgaging my house and drafting a power of attorney." "You were eavesdropping," Marina cried. And you were lying, Catherine retorted. Rather crudely, too. Did you think I was a fool? That I'd fall for your little play? Stephen tried to regain composure. Catherine, you misunderstood. I really do love you. Silence. Catherine cut him off sharply. I know the truth. I know you don't live in your own apartment but rent a room. I know you've been having an affair with Marina for 6 months. I know this whole story about my debts was a fabrication to test your intentions. What debts? The fake notary asked in confusion. Shut up, Daniel. Marina hissed, then turned to Catherine. Fine, and what now? What do you want? I want you out of my house, and never to show your faces here again, Catherine said firmly. And you, Marina, forget my phone number. And if we don't want to? Marina's voice carried a clear threat. What if we tell everyone what a greedy bitch you are? How you refuse to help your best friend in a difficult time? Tell who? Catherine smirked. I don't have mutual acquaintances with you, except colleagues. And clients aren't likely to care about gossip. Stephen tried to play his last card. Catherine, all right, I admitted things didn't start out very honestly. But I really did fall in love with you. You fell in love with the house, Catherine corrected him. Not with me. All your compliments were directed at the property, not at my personality. What interested you most about me? My looks, my character, my habits? Or the size of the lot, the condition of the house, the ownership documents? Stephen stood with his head lowered, unable to find an answer. And you, Marina, Catherine went on, I take it you were the curator of this project? You told him about my tastes and habits so he could appear to be the perfect man? I wanted what was best, Marina snapped. I thought it would be an honest marriage. You'd get a husband, he'd get the house. Everyone happy. And you? What would you have gotten? Marina hesitated, then defiantly lifted her chin. Stephen promised to buy me an apartment after he registered the house in his name. I see. With the money from selling my house, Catherine nodded. So the plan was this: get married, transfer the property, get divorced, and sell. Leaving me with nothing. You'd have gotten half in the divorce, Stephen muttered. Half of what? Of debts? You'd have mortgaged the house for a loan first. At that moment came a knock at the door. Catherine opened it. Uncle Bill was standing there, concern on his face. Catherine, did you call for help? He asked, glancing at the guests. I heard raised voices. It's all right, Uncle Bill, Catherine reassured him. These people were just about to leave. Maybe I should stay, the neighbor offered. Just in case. We're leaving ourselves, Marina said quickly, grabbing her bag. No need to make a scene. Excellent, Uncle Bill nodded, but didn't move from the doorway. Stephen gathered his fake documents. Catherine, we'll see each other again. Don't think this will end so easily. What's that supposed to mean? Uncle Bill cut in, straightening to his full height. Are you threatening this young woman? No, of course not. Stephen stammered. Just words. Then head to your cars, the neighbor suggested. I'll walk you out so you don't lose your way. The fake notary was already at the door, clearly eager to get out. As she passed Catherine, Marina hissed venomously. You shouldn't have quarreled with me. You'll regret it. I already do, Catherine replied. I regret not seeing your true nature sooner. When the swindlers had gone, Uncle Bill stayed another half hour. He asked about what had happened and suggested going to the police. Not yet, Catherine said. Formally, they haven't done anything illegal. They tried to deceive me, but it didn't work. Well, it's your choice. But if anything happens, call me right away. I'm nearby. When the neighbor left, Catherine sat down in an armchair and felt the tension of the past days finally begin to let go. Rusty immediately appeared from the bedroom and jumped onto her lap. Well, my clever one, she said, stroking the cat. You were right from the very start. Forgive me for not listening. Rusty purred and rubbed his face against her hand. In his green eyes shone relief. The danger had passed, the house was safe, his mistress secure. That evening Catherine sat by the fireplace, sipping tea and reflecting on what had happened. It hurt to realize that her only close friend had betrayed her for money. But on the other hand, it was better that everything came out before the wedding, not after. The recorder with its tapes lay on the table. Catherine decided to keep them just in case. Who knew Stephen and Marina might try to cause trouble again? Tomorrow a new life begins, she told Rusty. No lies, no deceit. Though I'll have to get used to loneliness. The cat meowed, as if reminding her she wasn't alone. She had him, she had the house, she had the memories of her grandparents' true love. And that meant there was still hope of one day finding her own true love. The very one the mysterious woman in the park had spoken of, where it smells of fresh bread. 3 months had passed since that memorable day when Catherine had exposed the swindlers. The winter had been snowy and frosty, the house buried in white drifts, while in the evenings oak logs crackled in the fireplace. Rusty had fully recovered. He ate with appetite again, played and purred, as if rejoicing that the danger was gone. Catherine, too, was slowly recovering from the betrayal. Work helped her keep busy. There were plenty of orders, spring was approaching, and clients were planning renovations of their country homes. But in her free time sadness still returned. Especially in the evenings, when the silence grew too loud. She heard nothing more of Stephen and Marina. She had blocked Marina's number, and Stephen must have realized the game was lost for good. Sometimes Catherine thought he could have become a good actor. He had played the role of the perfect man so convincingly. In early February, something happened that shook up her measured life a little. Uncle Bill came over with news. Catherine, remember those unpleasant guests of yours? Well, I saw one of them in town, the one who pretended to be your fiancé. Stephen? Catherine was surprised. Where? Downtown, near the bank. He was walking arm in arm with a lady, an older one, elegant. They had an expensive car, a driver. Looks like he's found a new victim. Catherine shook her head. So Stephen hadn't abandoned his ways and was still preying on lonely women with property. She pitied that lady, but there was no way to warn her. And what about the other one, your girlfriend? Uncle Bill asked. I don't know and I don't want to know, Catherine replied. I hope I never see her again, but she did have to see her, and in the most unexpected way. At the end of February, Catherine went into the city for shopping. She stopped by a large mall with stores for home and garden. She wanted to pick out seeds for the new season. In the gardening section stood a familiar figure in an expensive fur coat. Marina was sorting through packets of flower seeds, carefully reading the descriptions. She looked wonderful: new haircut, professional makeup, costly jewelry. Clearly, things were going well for her. Catherine wanted to slip away unnoticed, but Marina looked up and saw her. For a moment her face showed confusion, then she forced a smile. Catherine. What a meeting. How are you? Fine, Catherine answered curtly. And you? I see everything is great. Marina adjusted her coat. Yes, life is getting better. By the way, I'm married now, married well, to the director of a construction company. A serious, well-off man. Congratulations, Catherine said without enthusiasm. And how about Stephen? Did he land on his feet too? Marina's face darkened. Stephen. He turned out not as smart as he seemed. Tried to pull a scheme with some widow, but she wasn't naive. Now he's hiding somewhere from her relatives. I see. So karma exists. Listen, Catherine, Marina leaned closer, why don't we forget that silly quarrel? We were friends for so many years. Quarrel? Catherine repeated. You call an attempted robbery a quarrel? Oh, come on. Nobody was going to rob you. We just wanted to help arrange your personal life. At the expense of my house, Catherine reminded her. Sorry, Marina, but we no longer have any common ground for conversation. She turned and headed for the exit, but Marina called after her. Catherine, are you still living alone? In your palace? I am, Catherine replied without turning back. And I'm very happy. That was only partly true. She did love her house, her work brought her satisfaction, but loneliness still made itself felt. Especially in spring, when nature awakened, and she longed to share the joy with someone close. March brought the first warm days. The snow began to melt, patches of earth appeared on the southern slopes, and the air smelled of spring. Rusty would sit for hours on the veranda, watching the tits and sparrows busily inspecting the feeders. Catherine began planning garden work for the new season. She wanted to make a new flower bed by the pond, plant young roses, renew the paths. Work in the garden always calmed her and gave her a sense of fullness in life. One of those days, while she was making a shopping list for the garden, the doorbell rang. On the doorstep stood a young man she didn't know, dressed in work clothes. "Good afternoon," he said, taking off his knit cap. "My name is Anthony. I'm an electrician. Uncle Bill asked me to check your wiring in the shed. He said something was sparking there." Oh yes, Catherine remembered. Uncle Bill promised to send an electrician. "Come in, I'll show you." Anthony turned out to be pleasant company, around 30, with an open face and intelligent eyes. He worked quickly and neatly, explained every step, gave safety tips. "You have a very beautiful house," he said as they walked to the shed. "A real American homestead. There are almost none like this left." "Thank you. My grandfather built it with love." "That shows. And what a well-kept garden. Do you take care of it yourself?" "I do. It's my main passion outside of work." "And where do you work?" "Interior designer. I have my own studio." "I see," Anthony nodded. "No wonder the house feels so cozy. A master's touch is obvious." When the wiring was fixed, Catherine invited the electrician in for tea. To her surprise, Rusty immediately accepted. The guest rubbed against his legs, purred. "You have a clever cat," Anthony noted, stroking Rusty carefully. "He senses good people." "Yes, his intuition is excellent," Catherine agreed, remembering how the cat had warned her about Stephen. Over tea, it turned out that Anthony was not just an electrician but an electronics engineer who did repair jobs in his spare time. His main work was at a design institute, but the salary was small, so he had to earn extra. "And do you dream of something?" Catherine asked. "Of my own business," Anthony answered honestly. "I want to open a workshop for repairing household appliances. And I dream of a house in the countryside, a small one, but my own. To start a garden, maybe get a dog." Catherine listened carefully. Unlike Stephen, Anthony spoke sincerely, without trying to impress. And his dreams were simple, human ones. "And family? Do you have one?" she asked. "No, not yet. It just hasn't worked out. I work a lot, there's no time for personal life. And not every woman wants to get involved with a man without an apartment or a car." "But that's not the main thing in a relationship," Catherine objected. "For a smart woman, it's not," Anthony smiled. "But such women are rare. More often you run into mercenary ones." When he was about to leave, Catherine said, unexpectedly even to herself, "If you're in the area, drop by. I'm always glad to have guests." "Thank you." Anthony was clearly delighted by the invitation. "I definitely will. I have a few more jobs planned around here." After he left, Catherine sat on the veranda for a long time, sipping her cool tea. Rusty had settled on her lap, purring. For the first time in many months, he reacted so calmly to a strange man. "What do you say, clever one?" Rusty looked at her with his green eyes and rubbed his face against her hand. Maybe that mysterious woman in the park had been right? Maybe true love really was waiting for her where? Though what did fresh bread have to do with it? Anthony was an electrician, not a baker. But something in this simple, honest man had touched her heart. For the first time in many months, Catherine felt interest in a man, not in an imagined prince, but in an ordinary, hard-working person with kind eyes. Maybe it was worth giving herself another chance at happiness. Anthony really did start coming by. At first on business to fix an outlet, to check the wiring in the bathhouse, to replace circuit breakers. But gradually his visits began happening simply to chat, to have tea, to help with heavy work in the garden. Catherine got used to his presence and even began to look forward to it. Anthony turned out not only to be a skilled handyman, but also an interesting conversationalist. He read a lot, knew his way around technology, could work with his hands. And most importantly, he was absolutely honest. If he didn't know something, he said so. If he couldn't help, he didn't promise the impossible. "You know," he said once while helping Catherine carry bags of soil for new flower beds, "you've got paradise here. Every time I come, I think this is the life. Living in your own house, in a garden, far from the city noise." "And what's stopping you?" Catherine asked, wiping sweat from her forehead. "Money is stopping me," Anthony admitted frankly. "A house like this takes years to save for. And I'm still sorting out debts. My father was sick for a long time. Treatment was expensive." Catherine looked at him with new respect. Not every man would admit to financial troubles, especially to a woman. Anthony spoke simply, without embarrassment and without trying to arouse pity. "And what's the dream, to build a house or buy one ready-made?" "Either, as long as it's mine," Anthony smiled. "Big or small, new or old. The main thing is to be able to work on it with my own hands, to improve it. I'm a craftsman, I like creating coziness." At the beginning of May, something happened that brought them even closer. Catherine was working in the garden when she heard the strange sound of an engine. Peeking out from behind the greenhouse, she saw an unfamiliar car driving onto the property, a black one with tinted windows. The car stopped by the house. Two men in expensive suits got out, one older, solid-looking, the other younger, athletic. Catherine grew wary. The visitors did not look particularly friendly. "Are you Catherine?" the older one asked, walking up to the gate. "Yes." "And who are you?" "My name is Robert, and this is my nephew Max. We represent Stephen's interests." Catherine's heart skipped. So Stephen had decided not to leave her alone after all. "What do you want?" she asked coldly. "To talk," Robert smiled, but the smile was unpleasant. "May we come in?" "No, you may not." "Say what you have to say here." "Very well. The thing is, Stephen has suffered serious losses because of your unreasonable behavior. He counted on a certain development in your relationship, invested time and money. And?" Catherine tried to keep her voice calm, though she was trembling inside. "And that justice demands compensation. Let's say $150,000 for moral damages." "You're insane." Catherine burst out. "What compensation?" "For what?" "For deception," the younger one said harshly. "You misled him, made him believe in the seriousness of your intentions." "I misled him?" Catherine flared up. "He himself." "We know your version," Robert interrupted. "But we have other information. And if you don't want this story to go public." "Is that a threat?" "It's an offer to resolve the matter peacefully. Otherwise, we'll have to go to court, to journalists. You see, it doesn't look good a lonely woman lured a decent man into a trap." At that moment, a motorcycle drove into the yard. Anthony climbed off, wearing his work jacket, removed his helmet, and headed to the gate. "Catherine, is everything all right?" he asked, giving the visitors a sharp look. "Not your business, young man," the older one snapped. "Very much my business," Anthony replied calmly, stepping closer. "Catherine, who are these people?" "Representatives of my former acquaintance," Catherine explained, feeling relieved at Anthony's appearance. "I see," Anthony nodded and turned to the visitors. "Gentlemen, I think it's time you left. The lady of the house made it clear she doesn't wish to speak with you." "And who are you?" Max asked aggressively. "A family friend," Anthony answered. "And a neighbor. And also a former athlete. So I suggest you don't test your luck." Robert gave Anthony a measuring look. He wasn't especially large, but he carried himself confidently, and there was a readiness to fight in his eyes. "All right," the older one said. "But this isn't the end of the conversation. Think about our offer, Catherine. You have a week." They got into the car and drove off. Catherine stood, shaking with anger and fear. Ordinary extortionists, Anthony said calmly. They're trying to pressure you. But they won't be able to do anything serious. How do you know? Because I've dealt with types like this. A former colleague of mine got into a similar situation. Some swindlers tried to demand money. The main thing is not to give in to provocation and not to give them a single cent. But they threatened with court, with publicity, empty threats. They won't go to court. Proof is required there, and they don't have any. And publicity isn't in their favor either. What if other victims come forward? Anthony was right, but Catherine still felt uneasy. After all, who knew what those people were capable of? Listen, Anthony said, why don't I stay here for a few days? Just in case. My vacation is starting. I can sleep in the shed. Why would you take on such problems? Catherine asked in surprise. Because. Anthony hesitated, then went on firmly. Because you're not indifferent to me. And I don't want anyone intimidating you. Catherine felt her cheeks flush. For the first time in many months, a man had said something like that to her. And how different it was from Stephen's polished phrases. Thank you, she said quietly. But you won't sleep in the shed. There's a guest room in the house. Anthony smiled. Then I agree. Only fair warning, I snore at night. Rusty snores too, Catherine laughed. I'll get used to it. That evening they sat on the veranda, drinking tea and talking about everything. Anthony told her about his work, his plans for the future, about how he used to help his grandfather in the village as a child. Have you ever regretted living alone in such a big house? He asked. I never used to, Catherine answered honestly. And now? Sometimes it gets lonely. Especially on winter evenings. I understand. I also live alone in a city apartment. The silence is so loud it rings in your ears. Have you never thought of getting married? Of course I have. There was even one girl. But she wanted an apartment downtown right away, a car, a summer house. And at the time I only had a motorcycle and a rented room. And what happened? You broke up. We broke up. She said she wouldn't wait until I got rich. Married a banker instead. That's a pity, Catherine said sincerely. No, not a pity, Anthony shook his head. Later I realized she wasn't my person. True love doesn't depend on how much money is in your wallet. Rusty lay at Anthony's feet, purring. The cat clearly approved of the new guest. And what is true love to you? Catherine asked cautiously. Anthony thought for a moment. When you want to take care of someone, protect them, make them happy. When it's interesting just to be near them, to sit in silence together or talk until morning. When you see a woman and think this is the one I'd want to spend my life with, raise children, grow old together. There was such sincerity in his voice that Catherine caught her breath. When Stephen spoke beautiful words, they had always sounded rehearsed. But Anthony spoke as if he was thinking of her. Beautifully said, she whispered. Truthfully said, Anthony corrected. Catherine, may I be completely honest? Of course. Since the day I first came here, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you. I know it's too soon, that we barely know each other. But feelings don't ask for permission. Catherine was silent, not knowing what to say. Her heart was pounding, and a strange warmth spread in her chest. I'm not asking for an answer now, Anthony went on. I just wanted you to know. And to understand I don't come here because of the house or the money. I need you, not your property. How can you be so sure? Catherine asked softly. Because if you lived in a one-room apartment on the outskirts, I'd still have fallen in love with your eyes, your smile, the way you talk to your cat. Catherine felt tears welling in her eyes. When was the last time a man had said such words to her? And most importantly, when was the last time she believed them? Anthony, I need time to think, she said. Of course. As much time as you need. I'm in no hurry. The night passed quietly, but Catherine hardly slept. Anthony's words kept running through her mind, and she couldn't make sense of her feelings. On the one hand, after Stephen's betrayal, she was afraid of being deceived again. On the other, Anthony was completely different, honest, and open. Even Rusty, who never misjudged people, had accepted him as one of their own. In the morning, Anthony rose early and made breakfast. Catherine came down to the kitchen to find the table set, coffee brewed, and something giving off an appetizing smell in the oven. "What's this?" she asked in surprise. "Bread," Anthony smiled, wiping his hands on a towel. "My grandfather taught me as a kid. Said a man should know how to bake bread, it's the foundation of life." Catherine froze in place. Fresh bread. The words of the mysterious woman in the park echoed in her memory, underscored true love awaits you where the scent of fresh bread lingers and where skillful hands create goodness. Underscored Catherine, what's wrong? Anthony asked with concern. You've gone pale. It's nothing, just. She shook her head. Just unexpected. No one has baked bread for me in a long time. Anthony pulled a golden loaf from the oven, and the whole kitchen filled with a wondrous aroma. Such a smell hadn't been in the house since her grandmother had passed away, who had always baked bread herself. Try it. Anthony cut a still warm slice and spread it with homemade butter. It's an old recipe, with no additives. Catherine took a bite. The bread was unbelievably delicious with a crispy crust and soft, fragrant crumb. In her mouth unfolded the taste of childhood, of her grandmother's home, of her real family. Delicious, she said quietly. Very delicious. Grandfather used to say that bread is love, Anthony said, pouring coffee. If you bake with your soul, it turns out soulful. After breakfast, they worked together in the garden. Anthony helped trim the bushes, repair the fence, clear the paths. He worked briskly and skillfully. It was clear his hands were well accustomed to labor. And he kept talking the whole time about his grandfather's village, about his job, about simple observations on life. You know, he said as they took a break by the pond, I've always dreamed of a life like this. To wake up not to an alarm, but to the song of birds. To work in the garden instead of a stuffy office. To have a woman beside me who understands these simple joys. And isn't it possible to be happy in the city? Catherine asked. Of course it's possible. But not for me. I'm a country soul, even if I was born in the city. I need wide open spaces, fresh air, the chance to create something with my own hands. Tell me about your grandfather, Catherine asked. Did he teach you a lot? Everything I know, Anthony answered warmly. My father died young, and my grandfather became like a father to me. I spent every school holiday in his village. He was a carpenter, had golden hands. Everyone from miles around came to him for furniture. And what happened to the village? Almost abandoned. The young moved to the cities, the old passed away. My grandfather's house is standing empty now, slowly falling apart. Anthony sighed. I wish I could restore it, but I don't have the money yet. And is that village far from here? About 200 kilometers. Beautiful place, forest, river, fields all around. The air is so pure, and the silence so deep you can hear the grass growing. Catherine pictured that village and felt a strange longing. Perhaps someday she would see the places that were so dear to Anthony. Around noon, a familiar black car pulled up to the house. Catherine grew tense. Could they really have returned so soon? Out of the car stepped the same two, Robert and his nephew Max. This time they were joined by a third, a short man in a leather jacket with an unpleasant face. Anthony, Catherine called quietly, they're back. I see, he answered calmly, wiping his hands on his work pants. Don't worry, we'll handle it. The visitors stopped at the gate. Robert looked far less cordial than the day before. Catherine, yesterday we didn't speak openly enough, he said. Today we've come to dot all the I's. We have nothing to talk about, Catherine replied firmly. Oh yes, we do, the man in the leather jacket cut in. My name is Victor, I'm a lawyer. And I must inform you of some unpleasant news. What news? Stephen is filing a lawsuit against you. For emotional distress, for breaching verbal agreements, for deception. The claim is for $100,000. Catherine felt her legs go weak. $100,000. Where would she ever find such money? This is absurd, Anthony said, stepping closer. No one forced her into anything. And there were no written obligations. But there were witnesses to their relationship, the so-called lawyer smirked. People who will confirm that the defendant promised to marry, then refused without valid reason. What witnesses? Catherine protested. Marina, for example. Your friend. She's ready to testify how you were planning the wedding, choosing rings. Marina? Catherine couldn't believe it. But she knows the truth. She knows what's convenient to know, Robert said coldly. She has recordings of your conversations, photos, documents. What recordings? Anthony tensed. Phone calls in which Catherine talks about plans for a life together, the pseudo-lawyer explained. Quite compromising material. Catherine remembered her conversations with Marina and felt chilled. Of course, her friend could have been recording all their talks and then presented the information however it suited. But even if that's true, Anthony said, that's no basis for a lawsuit. People have the right to change their minds before a wedding. They don't, if money has already been spent on preparations, Max objected. Stephen bought a ring, reserved a restaurant, paid for a photographer. Show us the receipts, Anthony demanded. We'll show them in court, the pseudo-lawyer snapped. For now, you have one last chance to settle this quietly. $50,000 and we forget the whole story. I don't have that kind of money, Catherine whispered. But you have a house, Robert said with a grim smile. You could sell part of it or mortgage it. It's valuable property, buyers will be found. There it was the real goal. They were still trying to get at her house, only by another method. I will never sell my home because of your fake lawsuits, Catherine said firmly. Then we'll see you in court, the pseudo-lawyer shrugged. Just remember court costs will also fall on you. In the end, the sum will be even higher. And also, Max added with an unpleasant grin, we'll go to the media, tell them how a wealthy country lady is tormenting a simple working man. The public loves stories like that. Especially interesting to reveal, Robert continued, is that this country lady already has a new lover. Living right here in the house, pretending to be a handyman. Anthony took a step forward, and a dangerous glint flashed in his eyes. One more word about Catherine in that tone, and this conversation will end badly. Oh, we're scared, Max drawled mockingly. So what are you, her protector now? Protector, Anthony answered curtly. Well. Max began taking off his jacket. I've been itching to stretch my muscles. Max, don't be stupid, his uncle cut him short. We don't need a fight. We are civilized people. Civilized extortionists, Anthony said. Has a nice ring to it. Don't you call us extortionists, the pseudo-lawyer snapped. We're defending the rights of the victim within the framework of the law. Within what law? Came an unexpected new voice. Everyone turned. Walking up to the gate was Uncle Bill, accompanied by an unfamiliar man in uniform. Officer Johnson, the man in uniform, introduced himself. Received a report of a disturbance. What's going on here? Nothing serious, Robert said quickly. We're just having a conversation. Having a conversation? The officer pulled out a notepad. Do you have identification? And what kind of legal practice is this without a license? What license? The pseudo-lawyer faltered. Aren't you a lawyer? The policeman asked in surprise. You just called yourself one. Show your credentials. I'm not exactly a lawyer. I see. So, fraud and misrepresentation. And you, the officer turned to Robert, what is your relation to the supposed victim? I represent his interests. By power of attorney? Well, not exactly. Then get in the car, we'll write up a report, the officer said. And you too, he nodded at the others. But we didn't do anything. Max protested. Extorting money under threat of a false lawsuit, that's a criminal offense, the officer explained calmly. Plus impersonation. Plus threats. Would you like the neighbors to hear everything and record it? Only then did the swindlers notice that in the yard of the neighboring house stood several people with phones in hand. Uncle Bill had warned them in advance and asked them to be witnesses. "We'll just leave now," Robert muttered. "We won't bother again." "You'll leave after the paperwork is filed," the officer said. "Come along to the station." "Maybe we can work something out," the pseudo-lawyer asked ingratiatingly. "No one works something out with me," the policeman cut him off. "I'm an honest man." Half an hour later, the black car drove off with all three inside, escorted by a police vehicle. Uncle Bill stayed a while longer to make sure everything had truly ended well. "How did you know?" Catherine asked. "I'm not blind," the neighbor smiled. "I saw those types come yesterday. Immediately realized something shady was going on. Called Officer Johnson, asked him to keep an eye. He's a good man, fair." "Thank you so much," Catherine said sincerely. "I don't know what I would have done without you." "Oh, come on," Uncle Bill waved it off. "Neighbors should help each other." "And you, Anthony, well done, not afraid," stood up for her. "I won't let Catherine be hurt," Anthony said simply. When the neighbor left, they sat on the veranda discussing what had happened. Catherine was still troubled by the threats and possible consequences. What if they really do file a lawsuit, she worried. What if Marina gives false testimony? "They won't," Anthony said firmly. "Now they're under investigation themselves." And the officer explained to them that extortion is a serious matter. "But it's still frightening. What if they find another way to harm me?" Anthony took her hand in his. "Catherine, listen to me carefully. These people are cowards and swindlers. They prey only on those who cannot fight back. And now they know you're not alone, that you have someone to protect you. You'll stay?" Catherine asked quietly. "If you allow me." "I'll stay," Anthony answered. "Not just because of those types, but because I want to be with you." Catherine looked into his honest eyes and understood she no longer wanted to fight against her own feelings. She had been alone too long, too afraid to trust again. "Stay," she said. "Please." Rusty lay at their feet, purring. For the first time in many months, true harmony reigned in the house. And from the kitchen still drifted the aroma of freshly baked bread, the scent of home, family, and real love. A year had passed since the day Anthony stayed in the house. A year that had completely changed Catherine's life and filled it with meaning, more than even in her happiest times. Anthony hadn't just moved into the guest room, he had become part of the house, its soul and its guardian. With his presence, the cottage seemed to come alive. The creaking floorboards were replaced, the wiring fully updated, the plumbing ran like clockwork. But most importantly, the house was filled with the sounds of life, morning singing at work, laughter, and long evening conversations by the fireplace. Every morning Anthony rose earlier than Catherine and baked bread. It became their tradition to have breakfast with fresh pastries, plan the day, share their thoughts. Rusty, too, loved these morning rituals and always settled next to Anthony while he busied himself with the dough. "You know," Catherine said one spring morning, watching Anthony pull fragrant rolls from the oven, "I never thought I could be this happy." "But I knew," Anthony smiled, sitting down with her at the table. "From the very first day I saw you, I knew you were my destiny. Even when I was so distrustful and closed off? Especially then. It was clear you'd gone through something hard, but kindness remained in your eyes. And kindness can't be hidden or faked." During that year, Catherine came to know Anthony from every side. He turned out to be not only a handyman but also a wonderful gardener. Together they made new flower beds, planted young fruit trees, arranged a large vegetable garden. Anthony brought seeds of rare tomato and cucumber varieties his grandfather had once grown, and now their table was graced with vegetables no store could offer. The neighbors quickly accepted Anthony as one of their own. Uncle Bill often stopped by for tea and to discuss men's things, repairs, tools, fishing. Other neighbor women praised Catherine for her choice and joked that all the good men had already been taken. "You live like in a fairy tale," Aunt Linda from next door would say. "Walking past your yard, such beauty, such order." And the smells. One day pies, another day jam. Indeed, under Anthony's influence, Catherine had come to love cooking again. He taught her to bake real country bread, pickle cucumbers by his grandmother's recipe, make jam from rose petals. By autumn, their pantry was filled with preserves for winter, like in a real village home. Catherine's work also changed. More and more often, clients asked her to create interiors in country style with fireplaces, wooden furniture, natural materials. And Catherine gladly brought these projects to life, pouring into them her own experience of creating family comfort. "You've become different," one of her regular clients told her. "Before, your projects were beautiful but cold. Now they're full of warmth. You can tell right away the designer knows what a true home is." Anthony too had changed. The city's restlessness had shed from him like old skin. He had become calmer, more confident, as if he had finally found his place in life. In the evenings, he often sat on the veranda with a book or simply watched the sunset. And Catherine saw in his eyes a deep contentment. The only reminder of past troubles came from the news Uncle Bill occasionally brought. Stephen and his accomplices received suspended sentences for fraud. It turned out Catherine hadn't been their only victim. 2 other women had filed complaints. Marina left her bank job and moved to another city, apparently deciding to start over, far from unpleasant memories. "She did the right thing," Catherine would say. "I hope she understood that friendship isn't something you trade for money. And you don't regret losing her as a friend?" Anthony asked. "I lost her the moment she chose to betray me for money," Catherine replied. "A true friend would never have done that." That summer they went on vacation together for the first time to the very village where Anthony had grown up. His grandfather's house indeed stood abandoned, but Anthony, eyes shining, showed Catherine every corner, told stories, shared his dreams. "One day I'll restore it," he said, looking around at the sagging log walls. "Maybe we'll come here for summers." "We will restore it," Catherine corrected him. "We're a family now." Anthony looked at her with such tenderness that Catherine caught her breath. In that year they had grown so close that she could no longer imagine life without him. Yet officially they were still not married. Anthony delicately never raised the subject, and Catherine didn't dare speak first. In the autumn something happened that settled everything. Catherine fell ill, not just a simple cold, but with high fever and complications. Anthony cared for her like a child. He brewed healing teas, cooked light meals, read aloud, never left her bedside. "What would I do without you?" Catherine whispered feverishly. "Don't think about that," Anthony answered, tucking the blanket around her. "I'm not going anywhere. But what if something happens to me? What if I die, like my parents, like my grandmother?" "Don't talk nonsense. You'll get well, and we'll have many happy years ahead. Promise?" "I promise. And I swear I'll love you my whole life, no matter what." When Catherine recovered, she realized she could no longer postpone the conversation about their future. Life was too unpredictable to waste time on doubts. "Anthony," she said one evening as they sat by the fireplace, "there's something I need to tell you." "I'm listening." He put his book aside and turned to her. "I want you to be my husband. Officially. With registration, with a celebration, with all the proper ceremonies." Anthony was silent for so long that Catherine began to worry. Perhaps she had rushed? Perhaps he wasn't ready for such a step? "Catherine," he finally said, "I dreamed of this every day. But I was afraid to seem pushy. After what you went through with that Stephen. I thought you needed more time. We've had enough time. A whole year we've gotten to know each other, and I've realized you're the man I want to spend my life with." Anthony stood, came over to her, and knelt down. "Catherine, will you agree to become my wife? I promise to love you, care for you, share joys and sorrows with you until the end of my days." "Yes," Catherine whispered, tears of happiness running down her cheeks. Anthony kissed her hand, then stood and embraced her tightly. Rusty, who had been watching the whole time from his chair, purred loudly as if approving of what was happening. They decided to hold the wedding in the spring, in the garden. Catherine wanted the celebration to take place where they had been happy, among the flowers and trees that remembered their first meetings. They spent the winter preparing. Anthony built a beautiful arch for the ceremony with his own hands, while Catherine sewed her dress simple but elegant in an American style. The neighbors eagerly joined the preparations. Some promised to bake pies, others offered to help decorate the yard. "You'll have the most beautiful wedding in the area," Aunt Linda said. So warm-hearted, so genuine. In April, when the apple trees bloomed and the entire garden turned into a cloud of white blossoms, their wedding took place. There weren't many guests, neighbors, Catherine's colleagues, a few of Anthony's friends from college. But the atmosphere was wonderfully warm and joyous. Catherine walked to the altar along a path strewn with apple petals, feeling like the happiest woman in the world. Anthony was waiting by the arch, adorned with white roses, and in his eyes shone such love that everyone present felt their hearts tighten. "Guard this happiness," the priest said, blessing their union. "True love is a great gift, and not everyone is given it." After the ceremony, there was a modest but heartfelt feast. The table stood right in the garden beneath the blooming trees. Anthony baked a huge loaf of bread by his grandfather's recipe, and every guest remarked they had never tasted such bread in their lives. "Where did you learn to bake like this?" they asked him. "My grandfather taught me," Anthony replied. "He used to say that bread is the foundation of the home. If a man knows how to bake bread, it means he knows how to care for his family." When the guests had gone, the newlyweds sat on the veranda, gazing at the stars. Rusty lay between them, purring with delight. The house smelled of flowers, happiness, and freshly baked bread. "You know," Catherine said, resting her head on her husband's shoulder, "remember that woman in the park who predicted I would meet true love where the air smells of fresh bread?" "Of course I remember. You told me. At the time I thought it was just pretty words. But it turned out. It all came true. I met you, you bake bread every day, and we became truly happy." Then she was a real seer, Anthony smiled. "Good thing you listened to her advice and tested that." "What was his name?" "Stephen." "Good thing Rusty knew from the very start who was who," Catherine added, stroking the cat. "Animals don't make mistakes about people." "And I'm grateful to fate for bringing me to this house," Anthony said. "To you, to this beauty, to real life." They sat in silence, savoring the peace and closeness. In the garden, night flowers gave off their fragrance. Somewhere in the distance an owl called, and in the house ticked the old clock, the very same that once counted the happy years of her grandparents. "What do you think?" Catherine asked softly. "Would Grandma and Grandpa have approved of our choice?" "More than approved," Anthony answered with certainty. "Your grandmother was a wise woman. She would have immediately known that I truly love you." "And children?" Catherine asked suddenly, surprising herself. "Do you want children?" "Of course I do. This house was made for a big family. Can you imagine? Children's voices in the garden, a swing under the apple tree, bicycles along the paths." "I can imagine," Catherine said dreamily. "And it will be wonderful." A year later their dream came true. A son was born, a strong, healthy boy, whom they named Michael in honor of Anthony's grandfather. Rusty immediately took on the role of nanny, fiercely guarding the baby from every danger. And another year later a daughter was born, Annie, who looked like her mother but had her father's intelligent eyes. The house filled with children's laughter, and Catherine understood that life had become even fuller and happier. Anthony opened his own workshop in town and soon became a well-known craftsman. Clients came from neighboring districts, some for repairs, others for advice on home improvements. But every evening he always returned home, to his family, to his garden, to the life he had dreamed of since childhood. Sometimes, watching the children play in the garden, Catherine recalled that frightening period when she had nearly fallen victim to fraud. And each time she thanked fate that it had all ended the way it had. For if not for Stephen's and Marina's betrayal, she would never have met Anthony. And that would have meant no happiness, no family, no home filled with love and children's laughter. "Everything turns out for the best," she would tell her husband when they sat on the veranda in the evenings, watching their children and Rusty. "Even bad events sometimes lead to good ones. The main thing is not to despair and to believe in better," Anthony would reply. "And to listen to your heart. It never lies." And from the kitchen, just like many years before, drifted the aroma of freshly baked bread, the scent of home, family, and true love, stronger than every trial, a love that gave them happiness for life. The mysterious woman in the park had been right. True love really had been waiting for Catherine where the air smelled of fresh bread. And that love became the foundation of a strong family, passing down traditions from generation to generation, just as her grandparents once had in the same house, beneath the same apple trees, which now sheltered their new keepers. If you enjoyed this story, click the thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel. It motivates us to create new and interesting stories every day. Don't miss the next video, which you can see right now on the main screen. All the best, and may you be happy.